A few decades can sound like a far-off, impossible-to-reach future, and sometimes a small handful of years can add an odd sense of plausibility to a story's premise. Media have always looked to the future for stories, and sometimes they've been surprisingly accurate, and other times completely off the mark. Remember when we didn't get any flying cars or self-lacing shoes in 2015? Anyways, with that in mind, let's see what these movies, set in the year 2021, but made before, might have predicted for us this year. There is certainly a joke to be made about a movie that imagines a world where we all stay at home with our immediate family and don't go outside at all if we can help it, and how accurate that has been for the last year and probably will be for a little while still. But the 2018 horror film A Quiet Place, directed by John Krasinski, does add a bit of danger to the mix, namely horrible monsters with extremely good hearing that will violently attack anyone who makes even the slightest bit of noise, forcing all surviving humans to stay as quiet as possible. Say what you will about the last year and how things are now, but quiet sure isn't how I'd describe it. Now, Americans, we have to realize that not every sci-fi movie out there is made by us.
So, what happens now?
In fact, It's All About Love from 2003 was done by Danish filmmaker Thomas Vinterberg, much to the pleasure of the writer of this video. Thanks, Ash. Although from the looks of it, the critics didn't quite agree.
Fiddle faddle.
But perhaps that's because when people hear about a movie where climate change has gotten to the point of there being constant, raging frost storms by 2021, they aren't super excited to see Joaquin Phoenix and Claire Danes go through a divorce, even with the added threat of people being replaced by lifelike drones. That's interesting and similar to today, right? Sorta? Maybe not. Next one.
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
After starting his career palling around the time stream with his best buddy and bandmate, Keanu Reeves took a few swings at just plain living in the future, and he had a nasty habit of landing in some pretty dystopian ones. Sure, he might not be living in a simulation in 1995's Johnny Mnemonic, but he does find himself working as a data courier for absurdly and frighteningly powerful megacorporations. The film may have been critically panned at the time, but it's nonetheless an interesting early look at the age of internet data transfer, and just how easy it can potentially be for those with a little too much power to control the flow of information. Food for thought, to be sure. Not everything has to be doom and gloom when we try to imagine what the future might look like. Sometimes we might just ponder what would actually happen when a long overdue thing finally happens. Like in Jonathan Levine's Longshot from 2019, where Charlize Theron plays a woman running for president who starts to fall for her charming speechwriter, portrayed by Seth Rogen. No disasters, alien invasions, or dystopian regimes to be found for miles in this one. Just a race for presidency with what would be America's first female president and its very first man. Unfortunately, with the elections over now, the only prophetic thing about this movie turned out to be its title.
Deal with it, America.
Hammer Studios may be associated with gothic horror films and numerous pretty gory for their time reimaginings of all the classic Universal movie monsters, but that doesn't mean they hesitated to dip their toe into sci-fi every now and then. The oldest movie of the bunch, Moon 02 from 1969, imagines a world where by 2021, mankind has managed to colonize the moon and even build cities up there. No amount of human progress can stop greed though, as a small asteroid made out of sapphire soon sets a big conflict in motion. We may not have quite colonized the moon or put a man on Mars yet, but this one doesn't sound entirely impossible somewhere further down the line, considering all the advances in space travel. I'm sure we've all been told 1,000 times to properly recycle our garbage, and I'm sure all of us have failed to do so at least once. And while you really should be mindful about these kinds of things, don't feel too bad if you mess up. You might have helped the last bastion of humanity fight off aliens. In Resiklo, a post-apocalyptic film from the Philippines, the world has ended up invaded by a locust-like race of invaders from outer space. And with the world of 2021 in ruins, their only chance now is to grab whatever waste they can and use it to build not just weaponry, but flippin' mech suits. You know what they say, one man's trash is another man's anti-alien arsenal.
Oh my God, will you stop it?
There are plenty of movies about the aftermath of a world-ending catastrophe out there, but surprisingly, few deal with the days leading up to it. In 2012, seeking a friend for the end of the world, a meteor is approaching Earth, and the end of humanity is pretty much unavoidable. In response to this, Steve Carell's character Dodge decides to reconnect with his old high school sweetheart, only to be joined on his journey by his neighbor Penny, played by Keira Knightley. In the midst of all the doom and gloom, they make an odd but genuine connection, reminding us all to at the very least try and appreciate the now, even in the face of disaster. That's nice and all, but I think I'd personally still prefer there being no meteor at all.
He's not gonna die alone, he's gonna die with everybody else.
Time will tell if 2021 ends up feeling like a bad sequel to 2020, but since we're speaking of sequels, we might as well bring up one of those on this list. In the first Steel Rain film from 2017, agents from both North and South Korea have to work together to prevent nuclear war. But another nation gets involved in the shenanigans in the second movie, Steel Rain 2: Summit, when the leaders of all three countries get kidnapped and kept in a North Korean submarine, all in the middle of a summit between both Koreas and the United States to boot. And all of that in the year of our Lord 2021. Jeez, it's not like the world leaders don't have enough to worry about this year without nuclear submarines getting involved. Remember when Mad Max Fury Road made a huge splash as the first feminist post-apocalyptic film? Let's not show those people the 1988 cult film The Sisterhood, or their view of world cinema might just collapse in on itself. In the wake of the many Mad Max copies that popped up in the early 1980s, this movie depicts a world ravaged by an event called the Western War. And now, in 2021, bands of veterans from said wars are capturing and enslaving any woman they come across. But a gang of superpowered woman soldiers calling themselves the Sisterhood are having none of it, and go around using their abilities to free the captives. In other words, it's quite literally a movie all about girl power. Now, surprisingly enough, we're not talking about a crazy wig-wearing Woody Harrelson here, although he is set to appear in the upcoming Venom sequel sometime this summer. Instead, we're talking about the 2017 black comedy mockumentary Carnage: Swallowing the Past by Simon Amstell, where the entire UK has gone fully vegan by the year 2067, and meat eating has been made completely illegal. To explain how a situation like that came about, the film jumps back and forth in time. In its brief 2021 segment, not only are there a lot of campaigns about restricting meat eating, the UK is also battling a deadly super swine flu. Let's just hope that that one doesn't come true, as we've all got our hands full with one pandemic. Look, climate change is a very, very serious matter. With that said though, when it's put in the hands of a right artist, it sure can be pretty. That's definitely the case for Makoto Shinkai's beautiful anime film Weathering with You, which wasn't just Japan's highest grossing film of 2019, but also got selected that year as Japan's nominated entry for Best Foreign Film at the Academy Awards. This story of a young man escaping his rural home to move to Tokyo, where he meets a girl who can manipulate the weather, may not have quite the same apocalyptic sting to it as others on this list, but it does show the tiny, irreversible effects that permanent climate change may have on people's everyday lives. And yet, somewhere in the image of a Tokyo submerged fully in water, it still manages to carry a spark of brighter hope for the future, thus rounding off our list with a little bit of optimism after all. A bit of sci-fi catastrophe, a bit of hope, and a few surprisingly apt predictions. Sounds like just about every year to me. But maybe it's time to marathon these films so we can compare by 2022 and bet on what becomes real. My money is on the sound-sensitive killer monsters, or maybe the mech suits made out of trash. Yeah, those definitely sound like the most plausible of outcomes.